My first impression upon seeing my sister-in-law for the first time was that she was an extremely charming person with striking features.
Nice to meet you, my name is Catherine. I'm here to say.
But just when I thought I wanted to get along with her, that feeling quickly faded in the next moment. Who's this old lady? Is she my bro's wife's mom? The atmosphere became tense when my sister-in-law not only interrupted my greeting but also referred to me as an old lady. From this day, my hellish days began. My name is Catherine Johnson. I'm just an ordinary 30-year-old housewife. For years ago, I was a career woman, totally engrossed in my job. Not to brag, but I was quite popular at the office. I achieved many accomplishments and was admired by my subordinates, superiors, and clients alike. My husband, Bob, was one of them. Bob and I would often meet since we dealt with each other's companies. The start of our friendship was at a party with Bob's company when he initiated a conversation with me. It seems my reputation had reached Bob's company too. According to Bob, he wanted to see for himself if the rumors about me were true, so he decided to join the business meeting with me. At first, he was skeptical, but as we worked together, he fell in love with my strong core and way of life. He felt that I was the only one for him. When I heard that he was determined to make me fall for him, I thought it was cute, like something a high schooler would do. As for me, I had been smitten from the very beginning. You see, Bob had such striking features and was incredibly popular among women. Embarrassingly, Bob was just my type, so I had a secret crush on him. We were business partners, so I kept a certain distance. However, after Bob asked me out on numerous dates, we dated for a year and then got married. Our married life was smooth, and every day was blissful. Every morning, while I was preparing breakfast, Bob would wake up. With a gentle look on his face, he'd say, "Good morning," and give me a warm hug. It became our daily routine. Despite being older, his childlike behavior always tickled my maternal instincts. Furthermore, Bob and I have never had an argument. And why would we? Bob never gets mad. When I accidentally broke a plate he cherished, he was more concerned about me than the plate. I always think about how kind he truly is. Both of us wanted a child, so after getting married, I decided to quit my job to focus on starting a family. Any child of Bob and me is bound to be adorable. I constantly thought about names, especially if it was a girl. Time flew by, and this year marks our 3rd anniversary. We haven't been blessed with a child, but we were still happy. Except for one thing. Bob's family home housed his mother and younger sister. His father passed away from cancer before we got married. His mother is always cheerful and has been very kind to me. I believe Bob's kindness comes from his mother. However, his sister was different. I really didn't like her. Thinking back, it started from the time I first introduced myself before we got married. My first impression of her was that she was a very charming person with striking features, just like Bob. I had briefly thought I wanted to get along with her, but that feeling vanished in the next instant.
Nice to meet you, my name is Catherine. I'm here to say.
Who's this old lady? Is she my bro's wife's mom? Not only did she cut off my greeting, but the atmosphere went cold in an instant when my sister-in-law called me an old lady. My sister-in-law didn't greet me back, so Bob stepped in to introduce me. With a sarcastic tone and looking directly at me, she feigned surprise and asked, "How old are you?" I replied, 27.
No way, seriously? That's hilarious. I thought you were like 50. You really look old.
That was way out of line. I genuinely doubted if this girl was Bob's sister. She blatantly stared at me from head to toe, sizing me up. I just watched her in silence until she furrowed her brow. Whether she disliked my face or my attitude, I couldn't tell, but she kept making snide remarks about my appearance. "Your clothes are so out of style, you're overweight, your nails are unkempt." And more. After a while, I just stared down at my own feet. Bob's hands trembled with rage, while his sister laughed continuously. Then, Bob snapped. Something he rarely does.
Hey, what the hell are you saying? That's extremely rude.
She responded with, "Ugh, what? You're so annoying." Totally killed the mood. She's just plain nasty. And she would make these same types of snide comments to Bob and their mother. They had put up with her behavior for years without expecting any change in her attitude. Both Bob and his mother apologized to me later. They weren't at fault, so why were they apologizing? I felt sorry for them, but at the same time, I harbored anger towards the sister-in-law for making such remarks to her own family. To minimize contact, I decided not to visit Bob's family home anymore. I heard about the sister-in-law through their mother, but she never caused any harm to us, so I went on living my life peacefully. Then, one day, an incident shattered my happy daily life.
Catherine, Bob, I have a favor to ask. I'm planning to move to a senior housing facility with assistance in 6 months. Can I stay with you until then?
Bob's mother had injured her back. No surprise there. It's clear that the sister-in-law is to blame. Their mother already had a frail back and had trouble even carrying groceries. Yet, the sister-in-law who lived with her wouldn't lift a finger to help and would even make her mother carry her shopping bags. That's the level of her selfishness. It's inevitable that the mother's health would deteriorate. I just can't understand why the mother doesn't just kick her out of the house. Is it because she's her daughter? Maybe, no matter how bad the child is, a mother's love knows no bounds. I'm all for living with the mother. But that's only if it's just her. If we live with her, it means the sister-in-law comes with the package. Accepting it was the last thing I wanted. But, I was concerned about the mother's health, so I felt I had no choice but to accept the sister-in-law moving in too. Just as I had expected, living together was hell. From morning to night, the sister-in-law would only spew venom. Especially at me. When I cooked, she'd comment, "This tastes so bad. How can you even make such trash? You're weirdly talented." And then she'd ruthlessly throw the food in the trash. Whenever I folded her clothes, she would always find something to complain about. Sometimes she'd even say things like,
"You need to iron this properly."
Her attitude was like a rebellious teenager. In fact, she never even mentioned anything about how I folded clothes or ironed them. The sister-in-law has a habit of twisting words to fit her narrative. When cleaning the room, I have to be thorough, especially in the corners. Otherwise, the sharp-tongued comments from my sister-in-law start.
"Hey! There's still dust over there. You know, you're pretty much the maid here, so do it right. You're so useless."
Even though my sister-in-law doesn't lift a finger, she's quick to point out any flaws. I silently wonder when I'll escape this hell. As I continued cleaning, she added,
"Poor Bob. You can't even manage household chores, so the least you can do is have a child. I wonder why you were even born a woman." Excuse me? What's your problem?
I couldn't let that comment slide. I'd always held my tongue, but this was too much. But I didn't say anything more. Or rather, I couldn't. The look on my sister-in-law's face was terrifying, as if she was looking at something filthy. The pressure was so intense I couldn't help but look down. It was frightening. It was infuriating. All these feelings were swirling inside me, and all I could do was hold back the tears. Then my sister-in-law left the room, laughing smugly. One day, my sister-in-law came home in a great mood. When my mother-in-law asked why, my sister-in-law eagerly began to brag. Apparently, her boyfriend had proposed. She boasted that he's tall, handsome, and earns a high income. She immediately approached me and brought up my inability to have children.
"Well, I'm on top of the world. Losers like you should fulfill their roles as women by having kids."
She laughed at me with that familiar, mocking tone. It was shocking. She didn't have to say that in front of Bob and my mother-in-law. Bob got angry at my sister-in-law's comments, but she wouldn't listen. Suddenly, I felt nauseous. With tears in my eyes, I rushed to the bathroom. From behind, I heard her say,
"Pathetic."
But I felt so sick that I didn't care. From the living room, I could hear Bob and my sister-in-law arguing. My mother-in-law was beside me, patting my back, and said,
"Children are a blessing. It's up to you and Bob to decide the pace."
She comforted me with tears in her eyes. I wished from the bottom of my heart that my sister-in-law would get married and leave as soon as possible. On another day, after a routine visit to the OB/GYN, I decided to take a detour on my way home. There was a popular flower shop nearby that was always bustling. I was thinking about buying some flowers when an old colleague, Steve, called out to me. Even though I've left my old job, Steve still looks up to me. We occasionally chat on text, discussing work matters. It's been 3 years since we last met. We chatted for a bit, and he told me he's gonna marry his girlfriend soon. They have a date planned later that day. I was curious about why Steve was at the flower shop, but it soon became clear. Seeing Steve talk so happily about his girlfriend made me smile too. Realizing it was time to go, Steve picked out his flowers and went to pay. While waiting, I browsed the flowers, deciding which to buy. When Steve returned, he had 2 bouquets in his hands. He handed one to me as a gift.
"This is for you. It's baby's breath. The flower's meaning is gratitude and happiness. I've always been grateful for you, Catherine. Please continue to be there for me."
Saying that, Steve headed toward the train station. Gratitude and happiness, huh? Never having chosen flowers based on their meaning, I thought Steve was a warm-hearted person. I hurried home. I wanted to tell my husband about today's events as soon as possible. When I got home, my sister-in-law wasn't there. It seems she had gone out. I placed the baby's breath in a vase and prepared dinner with my mother-in-law. It felt peaceful and joyful to have some time, just the 3 of us after so long. With my sister-in-law gone, my mother-in-law was watching her favorite TV show that starts every day at 7 p.m. That night, I told my husband about the day's happenings, and we both went to bed with smiles on our faces. The next day, my sister-in-law came home in the morning. She had a bouquet of roses in her hand, which she suddenly threw at me. She said, "Put these in a vase," and then went to her room. I tried to put the thrown bouquet into a vase, but most of the flowers were broken or the petals were torn, so they ended up in the trash. I wondered how roughly she had handled them. I began to feel sorry for my sister-in-law's boyfriend. On closer inspection, I recognized the wrapping of the bouquet. After changing into her house clothes, my sister-in-law started talking again.
"Hey, I'm bringing my boyfriend over this Saturday. Make sure you dress decently, okay? Honestly, I wouldn't even want him to see you in your usual tacky outfits."
Her words irked me, but the thought that my time with her would be short brought some relief. On the appointed day, Bob and I were out shopping because my sister-in-law had asked us to. My mother-in-law texted to say that my sister-in-law's fiancé had arrived in our absence. She probably didn't want me meeting her fiancé. When we returned, the living room was bustling. When I went to greet them, my sister-in-law glaringly looked at me. I accidentally made eye contact with the fiancé. After a brief mutual gaze, my sister-in-law, seemingly disliking it, said,
"Don't just stand there. The tea's gotten cold, go get a fresh one."
Her fiancé tried to help, but she stopped him. My mother-in-law mentioned the beautiful roses and baby's breath in the vase, to which my sister-in-law made a snide remark.
"Why is your flower and the one I got from my boyfriend in the same vase? It's awful. Separate them or throw them out. Your flower is colorless and not cute at all."
She took the baby's breath from the vase and dropped it onto the floor. As I served the refreshed tea and placed the baby's breath in another vase, my sister-in-law's taunts continued. Apparently annoyed by my silence, she deliberately spilled the tea I had poured, staining the floor. The floor we had just cleaned with my mother-in-law that morning was now stained brown. From my viewpoint, I could see my sister-in-law's nervous fidgeting. She looked quite agitated. Bob brought a cloth and helped me wipe the floor.
"Bob, you don't have to get dirty for her. Come on, let's sit and chat."
The atmosphere was tense. Did my sister-in-law not realize that her words were backfiring on her? Her fiancé, who had been observing the situation, tried to defend me with his words. But, of course, my sister-in-law wasn't having any of it.
Why are you defending her? You should only be looking at me,
she exclaimed, past the point of no return.
Isn't she your sister?
Her fiancé asked, seeking clarification. In response, my sister-in-law uttered her usual demeaning phrase.
Nah, she's just the maid here. So it's okay.
My mother-in-law tried to silence my sister-in-law, but as expected, it was to no avail. She just went on and on with her usual nasty comments. Once she was done ranting with a satisfied look on her face, her fiancé looked straight at her and said something.
Let's break up.
What? Steve was livid. No wonder, after all, he was the Steve. I kind of guessed that my sister-in-law was engaged to Steve. The bouquet of roses my sister-in-law brought home was the same one Steve had bought just the other day.
Catherine is a senior colleague at my workplace, someone I respect and who's kinder than anyone else. And about that baby's breath flower you said wasn't cute, I sent it to Catherine. Sorry for my bad taste. Wait a minute, I had no idea you two worked together.
My gleeful sister-in-law began to panic.
Just because you didn't know, you think you can mock him? I've always heard about you being so mean, but Catherine isn't like that.
Steve's gaze was cold. My mother-in-law looked down, while my husband stood by my side, glaring at my sister-in-law. Everyone in the room looked utterly disappointed in my sister-in-law. Seeing this, my sister-in-law looked at me with wide eyes, begging for support.
This isn't a joke, right? Tell me it's not.
She pulled on my collar so hard it stretched my shirt. I firmly shook off my sister-in-law's hand.
I've always put up with your snide remarks. After all you've done, don't come to me for help now.
For the first time, I laid bare my emotions towards my sister-in-law.
You've got to be kidding me. You can't do anything right. You can't even have kids, you're finished as a woman.
As my sister-in-law tried to slap me, Bob stepped in and grabbed her hand. Bob, who had remained silent till now, grabbed a cup of tea and poured it over my sister-in-law's head in anger. He then shouted at her in a low, booming voice. Bob began to recount the truth about our struggles to conceive. It wasn't me who couldn't have children, it was Bob himself. Bob had male infertility. After diligent treatment, it was cured. And now, I was carrying our baby. Furious at my sister-in-law's comment, Bob shouted at her to apologize immediately. Seeing her brother truly angry for the first time, my sister-in-law was so startled she fell on her butt.
What's going on? Mom, you're on my side, right?
My sister-in-law tightly grasped my mother-in-law's hand, clinging to her leg in a comical manner. But she was shrugged off.
I'm done with you. I've let a lot slide because you're my daughter, but I've reached my limit. Leave this house now. You're the worst daughter. You ungrateful brat.
My sister-in-law, thinking her mother was her last ally, was abandoned by even her. Clearly, even she was taken aback by this. She ran to her room, crying. Steve said he would contact us later and left the house. My mother-in-law hugged me and said, "You endured so much, you did well," while patting my head. My mother-in-law, hearing for the first time that I was pregnant, cried with a smile saying,
"Why didn't you tell me sooner? Congratulations."
Bob apologized for not protecting me properly. It was a tumultuous few minutes, but I felt refreshed having finally expressed my feelings to my sister-in-law. I'll never forget what happened today. Later, my mother-in-law moved to a senior living community, and the family home was sold. Bob and I decided to move closer to my mother-in-law. We wanted her to watch our child grow up. I haven't heard anything about my sister-in-law since. After that, Bob dragged his reclusive sister out of the room and forcefully threw her out of the house, belongings and all. No one has been in touch with the sister-in-law, so nobody knows where she is or what she's up to. I got a message from Steve via text that he had sent a letter and some flowers. A bouquet of baby's breath had just arrived in the mail. I put the bouquet of baby's breath into a vase and started reading the letter.
Catherine, I'm so sorry for my late response. How have you been feeling? Congratulations on your pregnancy. It was such unexpected happy news that it even made me happy.
The letter went on to discuss his relationship with the sister-in-law after that incident. It seems that Steve and the sister-in-law had met once after the event. This was because it later came to light that the sister-in-law had been two-timing. Steve found out when the other man she was seeing contacted him. Since then, he's cut ties and they're no longer in touch. If they had gotten married, he would have surely regretted it. The letter was filled with his gratitude. I should be the one thanking Steve, but he really is a sincere young man. I truly hope he finds happiness. The end of my sister-in-law, who bullied me relentlessly, was unexpected. Through these events, I realized how one's actions, good or bad, come back to oneself based on how you treat others. I hope my child will be filled with compassion and understanding.